I'm using this today, yeah. So, all right, we're going to start from the Mishnah on the bottom of Lamed Chet Amud Bet, because today's daf is actually Lamed Tet, so we're going to start Lamed Chet, second Amud at the bottom, the new Mishnah. Ein notnin betza mecham b'shvil shetitgalgel. You can't put an egg next to the hot water, like next to the hot water urn, so that it becomes a little bit cooked. Shetitgalgel means it'll become like a hard-boiled egg a little bit from putting it next to the hot water. Velo yafki'ena besudarin, and you can't take. What they would do was they would leave, let's say, a cloth in the sun to become very hot, and then put the egg into the cloth, and it would cook in the cloth. You can't do that on Shabbat. Rabbi Yossi matir, but Rabbi Yossi allows it, and we're going to see that Rabbi Yossi allows it because he says that something heated by the sun is okay to use on Shabbat. Okay, we're going to see why. Velo yatminena b'chol u'ba'avak derachim b'shvil shetitzle, and you also cannot put it into the dirt. In other words, let's say the sand on the beach has been heated. Sand on the beach is very hot. You can't put an egg in the beach sand so that it cooks a little bit in the sand, or avak derachim, or in the dirt of the street that becomes hot. Masekhet Shabbat Daf. There was something that the people of Tiberia did. Ve'heviu silon shel tzonen letoch amah shel hamin. That what they did was they had a pipe of cold water and they passed it through hot water. Okay, so that way the hot water would heat the cold water, and that we're going to see the hot water was actually from the Chamet Tiberia. It was from the springs of Tiberia, the natural hot springs. So because the water passed through, it would become warm, and they could open the faucet on Shabbat, and the warm water would come out.
That's clever.
It was smart. So Amru lahem Chachamim, but the Chachamim didn't like that. They said, Im Shabbat, if you're opening this faucet and the water's passing through on Shabbat, even though you didn't put the water in. In other words, you didn't put the water. The water is automatically passing through this warm area. You're just using the water, but the water is passing through on Shabbat automatically. So it says if that's happening, then then we're going to treat this water like water that was heated on Shabbat. Even though you didn't do it on Shabbat, really, you just left it to go automatically. And you can't use it for washing or for drinking. Im b'yom tov, if you did this on Yom Tov, kechamin shuchamu b'yom tov, we're going to treat it like hot water that you heated on Yom Tov, which means vasurin b'rochital mutar b'shtiyah. You can drink it, of course, because you're allowed to heat water for drinking on Yom Tov, but you're not allowed to heat water for washing on Yom Tov, as we're going to see. So therefore, you're not allowed to use it for washing on Yom Tov. We're going to see the details in the Gemara. But the point is that even though this was a really creative way of having water automatically heated through natural means on Yom Tov and Shabbat, the rabbis were worried that people would confuse this with a normal way of heating water and would violate Shabbat, so they didn't allow them to use the water. The Gemara asks, Ibaylo Gilgel Mai, you said that we cannot put an egg next to the urn, the water urn on Shabbat in order to cook it. What happens if you did that? Amar Rav Yosef, Gilgel Chayav Chatat. He says, it's not just that you're not allowed to put an egg next to an urn. If you do that, it's considered cooking on Shabbat, and Chayav Chatat, you actually violated Shabbat. You have to bring a korban in the times of the Beit HaMikdash. You're not allowed to do it. Amar Mar, Bered Ravina, Mar, the son of Ravina said, Af Ananamitanina, we also learned, as we come to Lamed Tetamur Aleph, Kol Shabbat B'chamin V'lefnei Shabbat Shorin Oto B'chamin B'Shabbat, anything that was already cooked before Shabbat, in other words, it was placed in hot water before Shabbat. So for instance, if you already boiled this egg before Shabbat, and now you want to put it in hot water just to warm it up, that is okay. But if it was not cooked before Shabbat, it never came into contact with hot water or with heat before Shabbat, then you can wash it in hot water on Shabbat, but you can't put it into hot water because that will cook it. And he says, however, these are two different types of fish. That there were certain types of fish that the only way that they cooked them was by pouring hot water over them. So that's considered cooking them. So in that case, you wouldn't be allowed to do that on Shabbat because that's the cooking. But for any other item where cooking it means actually putting it into a hot pot of water, you're not allowed to do that if it hasn't been cooked before. If it was already cooked, this egg was already cooked before Shabbat, and you want to put it against the hot water urn just to heat it, that would be okay. But if it's a raw egg and you're actually going to cook it, you can't. Shmami, now we hear from this that it is a bona fide violation of Shabbat to heat this egg if it hasn't been cooked before. Now the Gemara says, we said that you cannot take a cloth that you heated in the sun and put an egg in it and wrap the egg in the cloth and hope that it's going to cook on Shabbat. But we said in the Mishnah, notnin tavshil letoch habor b'shvil sheish shamor ve'et hamayim hayafim bara'im b'shvil sheyitzanenu ve'et hatzonen b'chama b'shvil sheyichamu. We said that you can take food that you want to preserve and put it into a pit. In other words, you don't want to leave it out in the sun. You want to cool it. They didn't have refrigerators. They put it in a pit. Or you want to take water that's warm and cool it, so you put it in mayim ra'im. You put it in a cool stream, let's say, of cold water, but you put it in a container. It's in a container. The water that you have is clean water. You put it in a container to cool it, so you can cool things on Shabbat. That's no problem. And if you have a cold thing, you can put it in the sun to warm it. If you have something that's very cold, put it in the sun, and the sun can warm it, and that's no problem on Shabbat. Okay? Lema Rabbi Yossi. Is this only the opinion of Rabbi Yossi v'lo Rabbanan and not the rabbis? Because in our Mishnah, Rabbi Yossi is the one who says that it's no problem to put the egg in a handkerchief that was heated in the sun. So is this Mishnah only Rabbi Yossi? And the rabbis say actually that you cannot put something in the sun to heat it? The Gemara says no. Amar Rav Nachman b'chama de kulei alma lo pligei d'sharei betoldot ha'or kulei alma lo pligei d'asir ki pligei betoldot ha'chama mar savar gazrinan toldot ha'chama atu toldot ha'or umar savar lo gazrinan. That the machloket is like this. Everybody agrees you can heat something directly in the sun on Shabbat. That's not considered cooking because it's not the normal way to cook directly in the sun. And everybody agrees, obviously, that if something is heated by a flame, for example, you heat a pan up in a flame, and then you crack the egg over the pan, you can't do that because that is from the fire. But what happens if you have a pan that instead of heating this pan over the fire, you heated this pan in the sun? Okay? So now you have a pan, it's hot. Now you break an egg and you crack the egg over this pan. This pan is a hot pan. Can you tell from looking at the pan whether it was heated in the sun or whether it was heated by a flame? Can you see from the pan what it was heated by? No.
Why is it different if it's heated by the sun?
Because direct cooking by the sun is allowed on Shabbat. Direct cooking by the fire is not allowed on Shabbat. What about a pan that was heated by the flame? That's considered the same as cooking with a flame. But what if the pan was heated by the sun? So Rabbi Yossi says, since the source of the heat is the sun, it's okay. The Chachamim say, since you can't tell the difference between a pan that was heated by the sun and a pan that was heated by the flame, we have to make a gezerah. We have to make a decree. Hold on. We'll get to that in a second. You have to make a decree that you can't use the pan because since it's indistinguishable from a pan that was heated by the flame. Now, Dud Shemesh, that's a different thing. That the reason why cooking by the sun was allowed was because it wasn't the normal way to cook. But now that using solar power is the common way to do it, they say you can't use that rule anymore. That leniency was a leniency when it was not the normal way. Now in Israel, for example, here it's still not the normal way. People don't cook with the sun. But there, where they use it to heat water, it's more complicated. You can't necessarily rely on that anymore. Now, we say, you can't put it in the hot sand. So the question is, why does Rabbi Yossi not also permit hot sand? He allows you to heat a pan in the sun and to use the pan. He allows you to heat a handkerchief in the sun and to use the handkerchief. Why can't you use the sand that was heated in the sun? What's the reason? So Rabba Amar Gezerah Shemiyatnin Beremetz, because he's concerned that yes, technically using this sand is okay, but if I let you put hot sand on your egg, maybe you're going to put hot ashes on the egg. It's similar. It looks similar. And you're going to say, what's the difference? I use hot sand or I use ashes. But hot ashes, you can't use that. So he doesn't want you to do it. Rav Yosef Amar, it's because you dig a pit in the ground when you use sand. You're going to cook with sand, you're going to make a hole in the ground. Making a hole in the ground is the Masekhet Binyan. That's prohibited on Shabbat. You can't make a hole in the ground. So it's considered building. So therefore, that's why, because we're concerned that you're going to make a hole in the ground by using dirt. So there's an extraneous reason, basically, that Rabbi Yossi is not going to allow us to use sand to cook.
But either way, it's a gezerah.
Right. My benayu, what's the difference between these two reasons? What difference does it make whether we attribute it to a concern about using ashes, or we attribute it to a concern about making a hole? Because if there's soft earth, very, very soft earth, so the reason that says that the concern is you might mistake it for ashes would still apply. Because even if the earth is soft, it still could be mistaken. You're going to say, well, I covered it with dirt, why can't I cover it with ashes? But according to the rule, according to the concern that no, we don't allow it because you're going to make a hole in the ground, there we're not concerned because you don't need to make a hole. It's soft already. It's already soft. Okay, so now, we raise an objection. Rabban Shimon Gamliel Omer Megalgalin Betzal Gabe Gag Roteach. According to Rabban Shimon Gamliel, you can put your egg on a hot roof. The roof is very hot from the sun. Put it on the roof, it's no problem. But if you have lime, that they would heat lime seed that they would use for building, for various purposes in building, you can't put an egg in there because that's the same as putting an egg in hot water. In other words, you melt the lime over a flame. So now you can't. If you put an egg in there, it's the same as putting it over the flame and in the water. But putting it on a hot roof, the roof is heated by the sun, so that's not a problem. So the question is, why does Rabbi Yossi allow you to do that? So we understand why Rabbi Yossi is not concerned about putting it on the roof because it's not comparable to covering with ashes. However, but according to the one who's concerned that maybe you're going to make a hole in the ground, we should be concerned. Because just like on the roof, apparently they would have dirt on the roof, and you would also make a little hole that you would stick the egg into. So why are we not concerned about it? Answer is, Stam gag lit be'afar. Most roofs didn't have dirt on them, so they weren't concerned. So everybody agreed you could put the egg on the hot roof, and it wasn't going to be a problem. But to put it on top of it, to put it in dirt on the ground, that was where the concern was.
That's interesting. Okay. The argument that I would give is like nobody would want to make a hole in the roof.
That's true too. Tashma, we come in here. So this story about the Anshe Tiberia, that they passed a cold water pipe through the hot water springs of Tiberia. So we understand why the rabbis prohibited it. Because it's similar to hatmana. It's similar to just like you're not allowed. We're concerned about insulating with hot ashes. We'd be worried here. It's like insulation because the cold pipe is going into hot water, so it's similar to insulation. And if we're concerned about insulation, we'd be concerned. However, if what we're concerned about, but if what we're concerned about here is not insulation, but it's digging a hole in the ground, and that was why Rabbi Yossi didn't allow you to use hot dirt to cook the egg. So if that's the case, then why would he prohibit the case of the pipe going through the hot water? It's not similar to making a hole in the ground. Why would we be concerned? So the Gemara says, the story of the Anshe Tiberia is not connected to the last part of the Mishnah with Rabbi Yossi. It's connected to the beginning of the Mishnah. In fact, Rabbi Yossi would allow what the Anshe Tiberia did. He would have permitted it. Okay? And this is what the rabbis said to Rabbi. I'm sorry, skip the part. Lo yafkianu b'sudarin. For Rabbi Yossi matir. That when we talked about in the beginning of the Mishnah, that Rabbi Yossi says you can use a handkerchief that was heated in the sun. The rabbi said to him, "Ve'hachi kamrei leRabbanan leRabbi Yossi ha maseh b'danshe tiveria toldot chamahu va'asrelo." We have a proof that you can't use something heated by the sun, because what did they heat that water with? The chamet Tiberia. They heated it with the hot springs of Tiberia, and the hot springs of Tiberia are heated by the sun, according to the rabbis, right? And therefore, you see that they didn't allow them to use that water. So, Rabbi Yossi, you're wrong. You can't use something heated by the sun on Shabbat, because look, the rabbis didn't allow them to use it. And that's Asrilu Rabbanan. Amarlu, he said to them, Hahu toldot urhu. You're wrong. The chamet Tiberia, the springs of Tiberia, are not heated by the sun. They are dechalfei apitchat gehinom. They're heated by the ground. And because it's the heat of the underground heat that causes them to be hot, that's not comparable. And that's why the rabbis didn't allow them to use the hot springs of Tiberia to heat water on Shabbat. Amar Rav Chisda says, "Mimaset she'asu anshe Tiberia va'asrei lehu Rabbanan batla hatmana b'davar mosif hevel va'afilo mibod yom." From the story of the people of Tiberia, we learn that it's not allowed to insulate something when the insulation increases temperature, even if you put the insulation on from before Shabbat. Because you see that they put this pipe of water into the hot water even before Shabbat, and yet they weren't allowed to use it. Amar Ula said, "Halacha Anshe Tiberia." I think the Anshe Tiberia were right. You're allowed to let a cold pipe go through hot water. But Amar le Rav Nachman said, "Kavar tavrinu Anshe Tiberia lesilunayu." Even the people of Tiberia already retracted. So you're wrong. Even they agreed they're not allowed to do it. So we're not allowed to have a cold pipe going through hot water on Shabbat in order to heat the water.
What's the reason?
What?
What's the reason? It's not a melacha.
What?
It's not one of the melacha.
To cook. They're heating because you can't heat the water on. They're worried that if you allow it before Shabbat, then people will make a mistake and they'll do it on Shabbat itself. That's why. So in the Mishnah it said that if they did this, we would treat the water like water that was heated on Shabbat, and we wouldn't be allowed to use it for washing or for drinking. And if they did this on Yom Tov, we would treat it like water that was heated on Yom Tov, and you'd be allowed to use it for drinking, but not for washing. So now the Gemara is going to ask, what kind of washing? So, if you mean that you're not allowed to use this water to wash your entire body, I'm sorry, I skipped. That implies that you're not allowed to use this water to wash your whole body because it was heated on Shabbat. That implies that if you heated the water before Shabbat, you're allowed to wash your entire body. But wait a second. But the halacha is that even if you heated water before Shabbat, on Shabbat, you're not allowed to wash your entire body. Only your hands, your feet, and your face. That's it. You're not allowed to wash your entire body without water on Shabbat. Rather, so therefore, what must we say? We must assume that when it said that this water is like water that was heated before Shabbat, and you're not allowed to wash with it, that means you're not allowed to wash with it. I'm sorry, it's treated like water that was heated on Shabbat, and you're not allowed to wash with it, even your face, feet, and hands. Okay? But then, what about the end? At the end it said that if you used this special trick of passing the pipe through the hot springs to heat the water, that we treat the water, even if that was done before Yom Tov, we treat it like water that was heated on Yom Tov, and you're not allowed to wash. And you're saying that by not allowed to wash, you mean not allowed to wash even face, feet, and hands. Well, wait a second. But that's like Bet Shammai. Le'matnan stamake Bet Shammai. Are we following Bet Shammai? The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, Bet Shammai omrim lo yicham adam chamin leraglav ella im ken royin l'shtiyah or Bet Hillel matirin, because Bet Shammai is the one that says you can't heat water on Yom Tov to wash your face, feet, and hands. And you're saying that this Mishnah is saying that water that's heated on Shabbat you can't use to wash your face, feet, and hands. Water that's heated before Shabbat you can use to wash your face, feet, and hands on Shabbat. Well, exactly. They say that the amount that if you touched it and you thought it was cold, you would do this. In other words, warm enough that you would be surprised to discover how warm it is. The exact temperature, they say 130 degrees, 140 degrees, something like that. So
this storm I washed with cold.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's definitely okay. Now, but then we have to apply the same definition to the end. And it says that water, it's treated like water that was heated on Yom Tov, and you can't wash with it. Wait a second. You mean you can't wash your hands, feet, and face with this water? With this warm water, but you're allowed to. Only Beit Shammai says you can't heat water on Yom Tov to wash your hands. To wash your hands, you should be allowed to use hot water on Yom Tov. Okay, rather, what we're talking about in this Mishnah is something totally different. Amar Rav Yika bar Chananya says, L'ishtatef ben kol gufas kinan. We're not talking about making a bath. We're talking about taking a shower. Taking a shower is different. on Shabbat and Yom Tov. He's pouring the water over you. V'hai tanahu, and it's like this tana. The tanya, as we said to the Braita. Lo yishtatef adam kol gufo ben b'chamin ben b'tzonen divrei Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says that even if you heated the water before Shabbat, you can't wash your whole body, even in a shower. Rabbi Shimon matir. Rabbi Shimon allows you to wash your body if the water was heated before Shabbat. Rabbi Yehuda omer b'chamin asur b'tzonen mutar. According to Rabbi Yehuda, hot water is not allowed, cold water is allowed. Okay? So basically what are we saying? According to this, what it said in the Mishnah before, when it says that you can't use this water that was heated from before Shabbat, we treat it like water that was heated on Shabbat. Okay? And therefore you can't use it at all. And when it said Yom Tov, we treat it like water that was used on Yom Tov. He meant for the purposes of washing your entire body like a shower. And Rabbi Shimon is the one who says that normally you would be able to wash your entire body like a shower, but in this case, you can't. Okay, so that's and even according to Rabbi Shimon, who allows you to wash your entire body with water that was heated before Shabbat, in this case he wouldn't allow you to, because it passed through the hot springs and we're treating it as if it became heated on Shabbat. So even he would say, even the one who allows you to take a shower on Shabbat with hot water that was heated before, wouldn't allow you to use this water. And he wouldn't allow you to use it on Yom Tov either, because we're not talking about washing hands here, we're talking about washing your entire body, which is a bigger issue than washing just your hands. Amar Rav Chisda says machloket bechli, that where is this argument between that we're having here about between the Anshe Tiveria and the rabbis? That's only when there's a pipe, when there's a kli. Aval bakarka divrei kol mutar. But if the water was heated by the sun, okay, that was heated by the sun, and it's in the ground, that would be okay. In other words, you have a pool of water that's in the ground, it was heated by the sun, that would be okay. It's only when we're dealing with something that travels through a kli, that travels through a vessel, because in a vessel you can't tell the difference between something that was heated by the sun and something that was you have a vessel that's hot. I don't know if you heated it by the sun. I don't know if you heated it by the whether you heated it in the over the fire.
So
I don't know.
They're talking about a pool of water that's just on the ground.
But they're saying, but a pool of water that was heated by the sun. Now everybody would agree. That's what the first version.
Because it would have to be in a vessel to be contained.
Right. So that's what they're going to reject this. Don't worry.
Okay.
That's heated by solar panels.
That's a totally different story,
right,
because it's totally different. How can you say everybody agrees if it's in the ground, it's okay? We just talked about the Chamet Tiveria. The hot springs of Tiveria are in the ground. What do you mean? So therefore he said, no. What I meant was, we made a mistake. Machloket bakarka. That where is there a machloket between Rabbi Yossi and the Chachamim, or between the Anshe Tiveria and the Chachamim? That was when it's in the ground. That the rabbis say, even though it's in the ground, we're worried that people will make a mistake and think they can use hot water that was heated over the fire to cook things on Shabbat, and that you're not allowed to do. But with a kli, divrei kol asur, when it's in a vessel, everybody agrees you can't use it, because when it's in a vessel, you can't tell the difference between something that was heated by the sun and something that was heated over the fire. Amar Rabbi Bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Bar Chana said, Rabbi Yochanan said, halacha ki Rabbi Yehuda. The halacha follows Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda said you can take a shower if you heated the water before Shabbat. You can take a shower in that water if it's. You can't take a shower in that water because you can't use warm water, but you can take a shower in cold water on Shabbat, according to Rabbi Yehuda. Amar le Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef said, "Beferush shemialach o miklala shemialach." Did you hear this directly from Rabbi Yehuda? From Rabbi Yochanan, that he said that the law is you can take a cold shower on Shabbat, or did you infer it from something? My klala. How would I infer it? Because Amar Rav Tanchum, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yanai, Amar Rav. Because these rabbis, Rav said that Rabbi Yanai said that Rabbi Yochanan said that Rav Tanchum said that kol makom shatam motzei shenaim chalukin ve'echad machriya halacha kedvrei machriya, that in every place where we find two extreme positions and one that is a harmonizing position, we take the one in the middle. And here we have one that says you can't take any shower on Shabbat, not a cold shower and not a hot shower, and one says that you can take any kind you want. If you heated the water before Shabbat, you can take a hot shower, and if you don't have hot water available, you can take a cold shower. And then Rabbi Yehuda comes along and says you can't take a hot one, but you can take a cold one. So he's in the middle. Compromise. So the compromise always wins. So is that where you inferred that the halacha follows Rabbi Yehuda because he's the compromiser, and the compromiser always wins. And we have a statement that we always follow the one who makes a compromise. Chutz mikulei matlaniot, except for the case of the rags that we learned about several dapim ago, the rags that are either hung on the door, where we talked about the rag hung on the door, or the rag that was thrown behind the door. That these issues of these rags and when they are considered to be discarded for the purposes of tumah. You had Rabbi Eliezer who was stringent and Rabbi Yoshua who was lenient. For Rabbi Akiva machriya, and Rabbi Akiva came and made a compromise between the two and said, in one case lenient, in one case stringent. So he made a compromise. We don't follow Rabbi Akiva in that case. First of all, because Rabbi Akiva was the student, and they were a generation before him. And second, ve'od ha'hadarbe Rabbi Akiva legabe Rabbi Yoshua, because in the end Rabbi Akiva retracted his compromise and followed Rabbi Yoshua anyway. So we don't follow him. And what difference does it make whether I inferred that the halacha follows Rabbi Yehuda in the case of showering on Shabbat or not? What difference does it make? Because because maybe the only time we follow the machriya, the person who makes a compromise, is in a Mishnah. And this is not a Mishnah, this is a Braita. It's something that wasn't part of the main collection of Mishnayot. So we might not follow that rule. So then I might doubt whether the halacha really follows Rabbi Yehuda. Answer is, he says to him, Amar le ana beferush shemi ali. I heard it directly that the halacha follows Rabbi Yehuda. Namely, that if a person has heated water from before Shabbat, they cannot use it for a shower on Shabbat. But if they want to have cold water, a cold shower on Shabbat, they're allowed to. That's what he says the halacha is, because Rabbi Yehuda is compromising between the two positions, and we reach that conclusion. Have a great day.
Why didn't it start with that?